Hello, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm so glad to be here with you all today. My name is Kimsey. I'm an integrative nutritionist and owner of Progressive Health and Wellness. And I am very passionate about helping people, men and women struggling with chronic and nagging health issues, find answers and solutions for lasting results. So today we are going to talk about this is the start. This is actually part one of a three-part series on how to resolve anxiety without medication. So it's really unfortunate that in today's the current narrative around anxiety is that we can find tools to manage it, but not actually the quest to resolve it. Right. So, under the lens of managing it, we might look at therapy, we might look at meditation, we might look at medication. But ultimately, when we work with clients that are struggling with chronic generalized anxiety, which means they feel anxious kind of all the time or most of the time for unknown reasons. And I'll elaborate on that in just a second. But when we work with clients struggling with this, our quest is to figure out what is driving it from both the mind and the body perspective so that we can create personalized solutions so that their anxiety goes away. With the exception, now, I want to clarify with this that anxiety can be a normal emotion to have too, right? If you have a big deadline at work, if you have a loved one that's sick, if there's financial stress, right? Then anxiety can be a normal emotion and response to life events. But if you're noticing that you feel anxious for unknown reasons almost all the time, or maybe you notice other health challenges like brain fog or fatigue or insomnia or digestive issues, then those are situations where we would want to really dig deeper and see what's driving the anxiety. So, today in part one, I'm going to go through the food mood connection. So, what that means is I'm going to share three specific things, three really big ways that nutrition could be perpetuating your anxiety, and then share three steps that you can take to optimize your nutrition for mental health. So before I get into it, let me do one quick thing here. All right. Okay. So believe it or not, nutrition has a very big impact on mental health. Like I said before, I know the current narrative right now with anxiety and mental health is that it's almost always a condition of only the mind, when the reality is it's almost always a condition of both the mind and the body. So when we work with clients, one of the first things that we start with is food. So here are three ways that food may be impacting your mental health. Number one is inflammation. So there's actually this whole study around this called the inflammatory model of mental health. If you search into PubMed and do inflammatory model of depression or cytokine model of depression or inflammatory model of anxiety, you will find search results that look at the connection between brain and body inflammation and mental health challenges like anxiety, depression, major depression, ADD, ADHD, bipolar disorder, and the list goes on. So the way that this works, or one way that this works, is inflammation. To define it, that might actually be the best starting point. So to define the term inflammation, inflammation is the immune system's response to injury. And when the immune system is responding to injury, one of the ways that it does that is through the use of what are called cytokines. Cytokines, they've kind of gotten a lot of attention these days based on, you'll hear cytokine storm. So COVID, that term cytokine storm has been coming around. So what cytokines really are immune system communication molecules, chemicals, if you will. Communication means cytokines are used by the immune system to either attract more immune cells to the scene, the site of injury, or kill off or destroy perceived invaders. So like in the case of COVID, a virus that's trying to kill it off and attract more immune cells to the site of the injury. So with cytokines, when cytokines are released in the brain, then it can have a spreading effect where it damages nerve cells and it damages brain, like nerve to nerve, neuron to neuron communication. And when this happens, we can get imbalances in neurochemicals like glutamate or GABA levels or serotonin levels. We get imbalances within those levels and we get hindered brain communication. And then lastly, we can also get what's called dendritic pruning, which is where, to describe it as simply as I can, dendrites are the part of the nerve. I do this because they kind of look like tree branches. It's the part of the nerve where dendrites will then connect to an axon, and that's part of how neuronal messages are transmitted. And so more dendrites, more dendritic connections means learning, better communication between brain cells. So dendritic pruning means altered communication between brain cells, right? Dendritic pruning is where those connections start to dissolve or shorten or weaken. So going back to, that's how inflammation can affect the brain. When those imbalances are created, that can lead to anxiety amongst other issues like fogginess or other mental health issues. And food is a really big way that can happen. So specifically food sensitivities. And in a minute, I'm going to talk also about blood sugar imbalances, which is number 2. So food sensitivities, one of the ways that food sensitivities can create brain inflammation is, by definition, that's what's happening. The immune system views particular proteins within a food. Let's use gluten, for example, particular proteins within a food as a threat. And so those proteins can then migrate. Not only does the inflammation start in the gut, it can spread in the body, but it can also cross the blood-brain barrier into the brain. And so when that inflammation starts happening in the brain, then we have what I was just describing before. So food sensitivities are a really big component. And quite literally, if you search again in PubMed looking for research articles, gliadin or gluten and mental health or depression or anxiety, you will find search results. So that is one big way that food can trigger inflammation, which can then perpetuate anxiety. So in a second, towards the end of today's talk, I'm going to talk about steps that you can take to start optimizing your nutrition. And one of those steps would be, you can get into testing food sensitivities. That's awesome. You can try an elimination diet, like a paleo diet or Whole30. That's great. I would honestly start with 3 big culprits: gluten, dairy, and sugar. Those 3 are really notorious offenders when it comes to affecting mental health. So starting, take 3 weeks, do a 3-week trial of being gluten-free, dairy-free, and very low sugar, like refined sugars, added sugars in different products, and see the impact that may have. Okay, so inflammation is number 1. Number 2 of ways that nutrition may be perpetuating your anxiety is blood sugar imbalance. So the brain, actually, let me start. Blood sugar, glucose, those terms are used interchangeably. It's the same thing. Glucose is the body's easiest source of fuel. And what that means is if glucose is available, we'll always burn glucose for fuel. Major organs, there's some exceptions to that. But anyways, the brain being a big part of that, we'll burn glucose for fuel. And then if glucose is not available, we're designed to be what's called metabolically flexible. And that means that we'll shift over, we'll burn fat for fuel. And then if glucose becomes available again, we'll start burning glucose. So the short takeaway with this is blood sugar balance. We want blood sugar to stay within a narrow range throughout the day to ensure that we have all the fuel that we need to support our metabolic demands. Now, the brain, even though it only weighs 2% of our body weight, it demands 20% of our fuel supply. So what this means is if we have blood sugar imbalances, like too low or too high, neurological and mental health are some of the first symptoms that will show up. Let me list some. Do you become hangry if you go longer than like 3 to 4 hours without eating? Like angry, irritable, I have to eat now. Do you become ravenously hungry? Do you get anxious or maybe even depressed or like scattered or overwhelmed if you go longer than 3 to 4 hours without eating? Do you notice fogginess or tired or yawning? Do you wake up in the middle of the night, 2, 3, 4 a.m., with a feeling of anxiety? Do you crave sweets throughout the day or particularly after eating meals? Do you rely on caffeine or sugar to make it through the day? Those can all be, do you get shaky, trembly, kind of an inner trembling sensation? Those can all be signs that blood sugar may be involved. So, blood sugar, like I said, what happens when blood sugar in particular is too low, or a more common pattern that I see is not just low, not just hypoglycemia. It's called reactionary hypoglycemia, where blood sugar is doing this roller coaster effect throughout the day. You'll have peaks and valleys, and that can show up as like changes, fluctuating energy levels, fluctuating mood, fluctuations in focus, and productivity. So blood sugar is a really big, important hallmark of optimal nutrition, is getting blood sugar balanced. So one step that you can take also, and I'm kind of painting this picture for you. So if you like set the intention, I'm going to optimize my nutrition and see how much this improves my mental health, right? See how much my anxiety responds to this. 3 weeks. Set the intention to do this for 3 weeks. First, cut out gluten and dairy. Step 2 is begin with kind of working into intermittent fasting and time-limited carbohydrates. So go get a pen and paper, write these things down. Step 1, gluten, dairy, and sugar, sorry. Step 2, intermittent fasting, time-limited carbs. So what that means is with intermittent fasting, just start working up, set a goal of getting at least 12 hours between when you finish eating and like the night before, let's say Monday night, when you finish eating, and when you first eat calories the following day. So let's say you finish eating dinner at 8 p.m., you eat your first meal at 8 a.m. the next day. So start with 12 hours. If that's easy, if you're like, I'm not even really hungry by 8 a.m., cool, push it to 13. Same thing. If that's pretty easy, push it to 14. Ultimately, the goal, and where I often work with clients or set the intention for clients, is to get between 14 to 16 hours. Please note, I'm a nutritionist, but I am not your nutritionist. So this is not medical advice. There can be situations where intermittent fasting is contraindicated. So if that is you, then, work with your doctor first, or reach out to me and we can talk about working together. But I will say, if you're trying to prolong your fast in the morning and you start getting those hypoglycemic symptoms I mentioned, like the irritability, the hangry, the ravenously hungry, sweating, trembling, just eat, break your fast, because that's not what we're going for, is hypoglycemia. So just eat. Second part of that, the time limited carbs, for simplicity's sake, because I can elaborate on that. But step number 1, break your fast with protein. So when you eat, when you break that fast, have it be predominantly protein that you are eating. So scrambled eggs with some like spinach and a little bit of sweet potato, right? It doesn't have to be no carb, just limited carbs. Don't have time in the morning to do that, grab some hard-boiled eggs and a handful of like blueberries, right? Or a smoothie, a protein shake, just shake it up in a shaker cup and go, or blend it into a smoothie if you have the time, with some berries and maybe coconut and hemp seed or almond butter or something like that. So those are some examples of basing the meal with protein. All right, so we've covered steps 1 and 2, inflammation, talked about cutting out gluten, dairy, sugar. Step 2 is blood sugar imbalance, talked about intermittent fasting and time-limited carbs, breaking your fast with protein. Number 3, the third way that nutrition may be impacting your mental health is from micronutrients or a deficiency thereof. So one of obviously the biggest, most important roles of food is to get our nutrition, right? Get our micronutrients. Micronutrients are vitamins and minerals, and we'll lump phytonutrients into that too. So we have to try a lot harder in this modern time period to get all of our nutrition from food for a variety of reasons: depleted soils, higher than ever stress levels, chemicals that are in our environment, blah, blah, blah. So because of that, nutrient deficiencies are extremely common. And one of the biggest deficiencies, like 75% of the population is deficient in this nutrient. And this has a direct impact on your sense of calm, the quality of your sleep. Do you feel like you're locked in fight or flight? It may be a sign of magnesium deficiency. So we're highlighting magnesium here. So magnesium, there's 7 different forms of magnesium, believe it or not. They all have roles in different ways, in different biochemical pathways. So I'm going to highlight magnesium glycinate for this. And then stay tuned. If you're not watching this in my private Facebook group, Integrative Health and Nutrition for Chronic Conditions, go there and watch not only the replay of this, but tomorrow I'm going to drop a short little 3-minute video talking about my favorite supplements for anxiety. Magnesium glycinate is one of them. So magnesium glycinate is magnesium bound to glycine, and that particular form has an affinity for the nervous system. It's really great for anxiety, for helping to calm stress, for promoting sleep. And it can also have favorable benefits on things like muscle tension or cramping or even digestion, like constipation in particular. So food sources of magnesium. You can get magnesium from nuts and seeds, like almonds are a particularly great source of magnesium. Essential oils like olive oil or avocado oil, avocados. Certain grains contain magnesium, but I would more so go for foods that are more protein and fat that they're providing. Not that grains are bad for everyone, but there are other foods that I would favor first. I'll just put it that way. So nuts and seeds are going to be one of your best bets. And then, like I said, dark green leafy veggies, and actually I didn't say that, but dark green leafy veggies are another great one. And then liver, like beef liver, is another great source of magnesium too. And then you can also consider supplementing with magnesium glycinate. So there are great brands at most grocery stores, health food stores, and then you can take some before bed at night or even in the morning, to see how that helps your mood. So those are the 3 ways that food may be impacting your mental health, along with tips to optimize your nutrition for your mental health, to calm your anxiety and promote optimal well-being. So if you want more information like this, and especially to access the replay of this talk and catch the next 2 episodes for this talk, join my Facebook group, my free Facebook group, Integrative Health and Nutrition for Chronic Conditions. The link is in the description of this post. Join there. I go live every week on a variety of topics. We've got tons of free tips, menu plans, recipes, whole 9 yards. So join there first. And then also, if you're looking for more of an individualized approach, we do offer free 15-minute discovery calls so that you and I can get to know each other better, talk more about what health challenges you're noticing and what you're looking for. And if together we agree that it feels like a good fit, then we'll talk about how to get started next. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And by the way, if you have any questions that come up after watching this, even if you're watching the replay, comment below, ask the questions. I always get notified anyway, so I will come and answer all of them. All right. Thanks so much for being here. Bye.